This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Content Marketing World, the world's premier content marketing event. Find out more at contentmarketingworld.com today. Use the offer code BeanCast. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 555. Procurement is your friend. For Monday, August 12th, 2019, it's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. It seems like everyone in the ad world has been trained to loathe a single common enemy, the dreaded procurement officer. These cost-cutting fiends are a constant source of anxiety for agencies around the world. But what if it's all a lie? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, the challenging move from AOR to Project, Facebook rebranding its app portfolio, the tanking Star Wars brand, plus the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with one of the co-founders of marketing insight firm Metaforce. Mr. Alan Adamson is here. Hi, Alan.
Thanks for inviting me. A pleasure to be here.
Oh, my pleasure to have you on the program. Now, next, she's the founder and principal of marketing research and strategy firm The Difference Engine. Ms. Farah Bostic is back. Hi, Farah.
Hey, Bob, how are you doing today?
I hear your dog in the background.
Yeah, he of course ran up just as we started, just to see what's going on. He has some opinions about the Facebook thing, though. So
well, good.
I'll ask
As
him
long
about
as he's
that
going to
later.
be, as long as he's going to be useful to the conversation, that's all that we have to worry about. And finally, with us once again, the Admiral of Brand Consultancy, the HMS Beagle, and author of 5 books, including his latest, Built to Suck, a man who really, really, really needs your South by Southwest panel picker votes, Mr. Joseph Jaffe. Hi, Joe.
And that's exactly why I'm on again back to back, because I was on last week. I decided not to promote anything, to be all altruistic and all. And then about 12 minutes later, I said, damn it, I forgot to promote my panel picker selection.
You're killing the
So
magic here. You're killing the magic. People are going to believe that you're not really invested in this show.
Hanging my head in shame.
Well, glad that you can make it back, and I'm sure you'll add more value than just a panel picker vote, so that's fantastic that you can make it.
I just want the vote, and then I'm out.
Well, hopefully we can belie that. Well, let's jump right into the topics, and we'll get Joe working right away. But Digiday does these anonymous confessional interviews on a regular basis. It's one of my favorite sections of their particular website. And in the latest one, they talk to a procurement officer. Now, you would think this would be terrible. It would be awful to hear from a procurement officer. But in the piece, he, she, or they, because we don't know who they are, offered up an interesting point of view that procurement, even though it feels much this, that procurement, even though it's usually considered to be the devil by most advertising agencies, feels much of the same pressures for cost cutting. But at their job is not to find the cheapest price, but rather to make the case for the best solution. Farah, I'd love to get your reactions to this thought, that procurement is not the enemy, that procurement has a job to do about finding the best possible resources for the company to achieve the marketing aim, and that they're not being equipped well enough to do their own job correctly. What's your thought about that?
I mean, I think that's probably the preponderance of the experiences most agencies have had. If you've ever talked to a procurement person, more often than not, they're in that position where they're not that familiar with the services you offer. They're not that familiar with what the marketing team has requested. They're not that familiar with what the marketing team's objectives are or how they would tell whether a project was successful. The flip side of that is companies where they actually do have a procurement team who has some experience buying these kinds of services and is genuinely trying to make the brand team happy and also get the right partner in to fit the needs of the brand team. I have worked with great procurement people. I have also worked with terrible procurement people. And the interesting thing about that interview really is calling for more of a seat at the table for procurement rather than being this kind of an intermediary everyone loves to hate and everyone loves to blame for a process that's just kind of dissatisfying anyway. When I've been with companies that have procurement people in the pitch meetings, part of that process, even managing that process, it's generally been more collaborative. It's generally been more transparent. It's generally been easier to navigate. And when they're not there, then it's just sort of this, like, you think you have great chemistry with the brand manager. You think, you had a great pitch, but now you're being asked how you can cut costs. And it just really takes all of the air out of what should be about to be a great relationship. I think the thing that has to be accepted here is, look, not every company is going to have this great setup. They should all be moving towards, and I know in the interview they talked about wanting to be embedded with the marketing team. I think that's absolutely right. I think the same thing should be done for ad tech. That shouldn't be a separate procurement officer or a separate team who evaluates MarTech solutions. They should be embedded with the marketing team, and that's where it should all be headed. But in the meantime, where that's not the case, where in the case of this particular procurement officer, they're dealing with creative requests and somebody else is dealing with media and somebody else is dealing with MarTech, they need to all be sitting in the same team. Until that day happens, agencies have to accept that they have to figure out how to cope with procurement.
Well, let's dive right into that part of the conversation, this idea that there should be embeds. Is that a practical solution? I mean, Alan, what would you say to that? Because if you embed somebody, you need to keep that person busy a lot of the time. And procurement officers are dealing with lots of different procurement opportunities throughout the company. So how realistic is it to embed, and does it actually need to be more of an education of the person sitting on this, sitting behind the desk on the procurement side?
It's a little bit of both. They've just gone off from purchasing spaghetti, and then now they're looking at a creative resource. So, they are under time pressure likely as well, where they're asked to review too many procurements for them to really understand what's going on, and they're looking to, manage their time. So yes, if they could be embedded, but the ones that, as we just talked about, the ones that get what we're doing have been properly briefed by the brand person. The brand team have been brought into the team, and not just go talk to procurement and making them the bad guys, tend to add more value. And be better. It's really hard on the brand teams too. We all talk about I wish procurement wasn't here, but if you ever try to sit through 4 or 5 agency presentations, and I've had the privilege of doing that, everyone is promising they can do everything. It's really hard to scope out who's got what resources and what are they going to put against it, and can they solve your problem. So if you've got a junior brand team,
it's especially
they're likely going to buy the Brooklyn Bridge.
It's especially hard though for somebody who's not trained properly. And getting back to that embed question, I mean, is it practical to assume that someone from the procurement team could be embedded, as opposed to we just need to educate our procurement officers to be more knowledgeable about the things that they're buying? And, either of these solutions involve a lot of dedication and consistency and support from the company around them. And if, that's going to cost money. And the whole idea of procurement is to reduce costs. So,
I mean, it seems to me it depends on the size of the company. If you're dealing with, a Fortune 500, having at least an embedded in the marketing team, or embedded in the insights team, or embedded in the media team, procurement person, it seems like that's probably a full-time job. If it's not, though, if it's not a big brand doing lots of marketing all the time for a variety of sub-brands within their portfolio, then yeah, you've got to make some other decisions. But having somebody who's never bought these services before go through it the first time is going to be an education for everybody. And while yes, the company should be investing in that procurement officer's experience and knowledge and understanding of what the brief is and what value would be here, because I genuinely do think most of the procurement people I've ever dealt with, even the bad ones, and by bad I just mean they don't know what we're all talking about and they're trying to catch up. That's why they're bad. It's that they don't have enough experience with this. They don't have enough insight. They're not getting good communication from their brand team. So in my mind, the thing you have to do there is get out in front of it. You've got to work with the procurement person to figure out what the brand team is asking them for, and vice versa. If you're going into that pitch with those junior brand teams that want to buy everything, then your responsibility as a good partner is to say, this is all awesome. What are we going to have? What do we need to get you so that you can get through procurement? What kinds of questions are procurement going to ask you? And maybe they don't know the answers to those questions, but now they know they got to go get those answers. And that sets you up as somebody who's going to help them navigate that terrain and be a good partner all the way along. It also says you're willing to play ball with procurement up to a point. I think the place where we all get cranky is where it just feels like everybody's playing a game. It's that kind of, the pitch where you ask, so what kind of budget are we talking about? Don't worry about budget. Just tell us what you do in a perfect world. Well, that's a waste of everybody's time. Or, what are your business objectives? Guess. We don't want to share that with you. You come up with what you think our business objectives ought to be. Like all of that kind of guess, jump through hoops, pretend that the world is our oyster and there's an RN every month. Like that's just stupid. So we have to be more actively managing that process and getting out ahead of the inevitable hurdles we're going to have to cross in order to get through procurement and be good partners, both to the procurement team and to the marketing team.
This is an interesting part of the conversation, probably the most interesting part of it. And I'd love to get Joe's opinion about it. This idea that we need to change the way that we deal with both the brand and their procurement side of the business in order to make procurement part of our team, to make procurement an asset that we can use in our negotiations as opposed to the enemy in that process. How does all this insight change the way agencies should possibly adjust their pitches and adjust the way that they're building relationships with their clients?
Well, look, I think the key is the word relationship. And when it is a two-way street and when there is true collaboration, incredible things are possible. The reality is that there really isn't much of a relationship at all. And it's become, in many cases, adversarial. I mean, what Farah was saying is spot on in terms of, I did quite a bit of work with AB InBev several years ago. And we would do a lot of strategic work where they'd have marketing people coming in from all around the world, from different BUs, from different brands, etc. And procurement was a part of that. And I promise you that if you put them in a lineup, trying to find the strategic holdout or the procurement person, you would have never ever selected them, because in fact you would have probably thought that they were the CMO. They were so strategic, they were so smart, they really understood the business so well, and yet the minute that the procurement person shows up, there's almost like one of those kick me signs being kind of placed on someone's back. The reality is, it doesn't matter how strategic they are or how strategic they want to be, they're still there ultimately to cut the price, and that's their ROI. What I'd like to see would be more leadership coming from procurement, less about embedding and more about just being able to drive alternative, innovative forms of compensation. We really should be talking about royalty-based, equity-based, value-based, deliverable-based. There's so many different ways that we should be pricing and rewarding agencies on
Now
their
you're
delivery,
just
or
now you're just opening up a
answer's
can
not
of
there.
worms. Now you're just opening up a can of worms, because that's a whole nother argument about how we should be compensated. And but
Well, isn't that, shouldn't procurement be a part of those conversations?
oh, absolutely. I mean, that's part of the conversation. I mean, performance-based initiatives are some of the hottest debated topics in the industry. I mean, we've talked about it on this program a number of times. But I mean, I want to go back to something that was said in the article that still haunts me, in terms of how we approach dealing with procurement, because he said, or she said, or they said, essentially that that we don't go after the cheapest price, and even in your description, you went back to they're going after the cheapest price. Ultimately, that's their job. And this person insisted that was not what they were after. What they were after was the right solution, the solution that's going to get the job done best at the most efficient rate. So it's not about cutting costs. They're willing to take a more expensive option if it's the right option. It's just about managing costs. And I think that's a whole different way to look at procurement, and something that we could build into our pitches so that we can so that we're not going adversarial right from the beginning, where we're trying to build out a pitch deck that gives, forgive me the expression, but the Cadillac when we know we're only going to sell the Toyota.
I mean, I think that is, I've had the experience on more than one occasion of having a great pitch meeting, having great kind of chemistry check meeting. We want to work together. The person who's the ultimate decision maker wants what I'm offering. And then I get on the phone with a procurement person, and the procurement person says, look, they really want to work with you. I want to make them happy. The ceiling on their budget is X. Can you come in under that ceiling? It doesn't have to be wildly under that ceiling, just under it. and I think one of the other interesting things in that interview was the sense of they actually get punished by their marketing partners if they cut costs too much, because next year their budgets will be smaller. So, they want to retain as much of their budget for next year as they had for this year. So I think there isn't really that much incentive to cut costs too much. They're trying to figure out how to get the best value for money. And I think when we're going in there with promising the moon, knowing that can't possibly be what they can afford, then we wind up in this kind of, I don't know, it's a hall of mirrors. Like, it's just bizarre, the kinds of promises that are being made in both directions. And I've been on that one too. Pretend there's $25 million for this campaign, and we pitch and we pitch and we pitch. We win, we're in all the meetings, and next thing you know, well, the actual budget is less than $1 million. And so, well, then you can't have the thing we pitched you. The thing we pitched you is a $25 million idea. And in order to pull it off, it'll take the $25 million. And yet, now we're living with this other reality, and you can't do all of the things that you now want. That kind of dynamic isn't just about getting the lowest price. They're all trying to get the best value for money, and doing it in the dark is a bad idea. Doing it with a bunch of BS is an even worse idea.
That's not the problem for procurement, though. And I think that's a key insight, that a lot of the problem is directly with the client you're working with, the inability to, or the unwillingness to work within your budgetary parameters and just try to get the best idea out of the agency and then pull a bait and switch. And then procurement ends up being the bad guy in that scenario.
I mean, I think the other side of that, though, is I've had this occasion as well where the brand team doesn't actually know what the real budget is. They think it's, they've been told to go do something amazing, and so they think there's going to be a big investment behind it. And then they come back and find out they have $90,000.
They're
And
Neverland, yeah.
Yeah. They don't know anything either. And this is why there needs to be better internal communication between procurement and brand. And if there isn't, then if you're the agency that wants to work with them, God bless you. But if you want to work with them, you're going to have to figure out how to help them manage each other and manage them and help them manage you.
Look, we could talk until the cows come home about how procurement needs to evolve.
I don't know. I'm not living in Connecticut, so I don't have any cows outside. But I'll go with you.
Yeah, I actually saw 2 of them today, but they send their regards. But this really does, I think, conform to essentially the idea of let's see how big we get before we suck. Because when you're dealing, and someone said it earlier in the conversation, when you're dealing with the biggest of the biggest, both on the brand side and the agency holding company side, it really is just about scrounging for dollars, and it is about low cost. We've seen some of the biggest consolidated media pitches in our time over the last 10 years, let's say. And the dirty little secret when you talk to industry insiders is that pretty much the agency that won basically gave away the farm in order to get the business, hoping that they could grow and upsell and cross-sell and so on and so forth. And so maybe the opportunity is for the medium size or for the smaller boutique firms to figure out a better solution to really kind of almost redefine and manage expectations. But I think when we're talking about procurement at a global level, it's kind of beyond the pale. I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel for this process. It just seems to be a race to the bottom.
And gravity will always pull them to the simple equation. And whether it's time pressure, the equation they can manage most often is, well, there's some benefit, some value, which is somewhat nebulous, some time to measure. But we can certainly figure out how many hours, how many people, what are you charging for those people? And that becomes where these conversations get stuck when you try to sell a value on top of a cost, and the cost is always 2 hours of Joe and 3 hours of Bob and 3 hours of, and then once you're in that world, you are then on the, as we all know, on the playing field of how they're buying widgets and spaghetti.
Yeah, really good points, everybody. Well, we're going to move on and talk some more about this conversation, moving the subject on to the adjustment of the industry toward project-based work from agency of record type relationships. We'll get to that in just a minute, but first I want to talk about our sponsor for this evening. Yes, I'm going to be talking about Content Marketing World, because Content Marketing World is absolutely one of the best conferences out there, and agencies, you guys don't know about it, and you need to know about it. People who are working at agencies need to be aware that Content Marketing World is the world's original and largest annual gathering of content marketing professionals, all coming to hear the latest thinking on every topic imaginable about content marketing. And this is shaping up to be an impressive event. We're about a month out now. They've got a whole agency focus. They're doing an agency track, a branding track. They've got a special cocktail hour set up just for agency people. They are looking to get you in here. So this is one of the best opportunities for you to not only find out about Content Marketing World, but be treated like kings in the process, kings and queens riding into this place. This is going to be amazing. Now, the lineup is what's really stellar about this event, because they're keynoted by people like Henry Rollins. And if you don't know Henry Rollins, fabulous musician, really great writer, fantastic person, somebody you should really look at seeing here. Mindy Kaling is going to be there, great content producer. And nearly every major brand globally is going to be in attendance, and they're expecting over 4,000 attendees. So that makes this one of the biggest events that you can possibly go to on this particular subject. And what really excites me about this event, what gets me so jazzed about it, and what made me so excited about them becoming a sponsor on the program, is the fact that so many people who used to be BeanCast regulars, people who have been on the show before, people who come regularly, they're all going to be there. Christopher Penn, Ann Hanley, Kate O'Neill, Scott Stratton, Lee Oden, Scott Monty, and Tamsin Webster is going to be one of the keynotes on the main stage. We love Tamsin when she comes on this program. So all these people are going to be there, and there's really no good excuse for you not to send at least one member of your staff to this event. If not, come yourself directly to it. And one more thing before I move on and give you the web address and tell you about the dates. There are going to be literally hundreds of new business prospects roaming this convention hall. When you think about it, do the math. If every major brand is in attendance and you've got 4,000 attendees, you're probably going to run into somebody from one of the brands that you're trying to get business from. This makes this the ultimate new business conference. And because not a lot of agencies know about it, the competition is slim. That makes this one of the best values you can get when you're talking about conferences and if you're going for a new business reason. So the September 3rd through the 6th of the dates, Cleveland, Ohio is where it's happening. I don't want you to wait. I want you to go to contentmarketingworld.com right now, find out about the event, even if you're not looking to buy for the conference, even if you're not looking to go yet, even if you still need to get that approval, I want you to at least find out about this event and find out more about the great lineup of speakers. So go to contentmarketingworld.com, use the offer code BeanCast, all caps, make sure it's all caps. I don't know why. I still haven't asked. I don't care. Just use all caps when you type in BeanCast. They will give you $100 off the price tag. That's contentmarketingworld.com, offer code BeanCast. So register today, and I'll be looking for you at this year's event. Well, this past week brought the sad news that agency Barton F. Graff would be shuttering by the end of the year. But the big story out of all this for me came out of an Adweek analysis of the industry-wide problem of clients shifting from agency of record relationships to project relationships. Alan, obviously, this could be a dire situation for the independent shops, even more so than for the holding company players. So how do boutique shops navigate these waters? How does a boutique shop get ready for the fact that their agency of record relationships that are keeping the lights on may go away suddenly, and then you're dealing with a project situation that doesn't meet your budget?
Yeah, it's not only a challenge for the independents, it's a challenge for almost every firm trying to connect talent to get a job done. When I was running a business unit within WPP, I was a project-led business unit, and the conversations were always the same. It was always, all right, you did a great year last year, Alan, that's terrific, and you did 10, and now we're going to take a little, line, and you're going to do 12 next year. And if you explain that of that 10, 9.5 was project-based and not repeatable, it didn't matter. And so most of the agencies within a large holding company had some projectability that here's what the revenue will look like. And of course, what does that do for somebody running an agency? It allows you to get talent, hire talent, place talent, manage talent to make sure that talent is available to those clients. And if you don't have that projectability in a world where people are always nervous about costs getting ahead of revenue, you lose the ability to go out and hire and attract great talent, because it's hard to hire a great team and say, well, you're going to be working on this for 3 weeks, and after that 3 weeks, I don't know. We hope they stick with us. Maybe there'll be another project. So I think it's a significant challenge for the entire industry, whether you're independent or part of a holding company. The holding companies are more addicted, I think, to AOR relationships, but it makes every ball a jump ball. And in a business, it's still pretty simple, which is the best work comes from the best people. It makes it harder to make commitments to get the best people if you don't know what's coming around the corner.
One of the things about the move to project relationships that has always kind of bugged me is not that it's a bad thing, but that it really is a good thing. I mean, it's bad for agencies. Agency of record relationship, Joe, is, what the industry has been built on. It's how we make sure that we can know what our revenue is going to be this year and next year, and you have this constant that you can work with, this constant number. But project-based work is based on winning the work because you have the best idea, and it's at a competitive price always because you're constantly pitching. So from a client standpoint, it's a really good idea. And I don't know whether or not this is going to be a pendulum swing where we're going more to project work and then people realize we need agency of record, or if this is finally the swing that takes us to project work and there's no going back to agency of record. What's your take on that? Joe?
Oh, I did the mute thing. What a rookie mistake.
Yes, you did.
I just wish I'd remembered what I was saying. No, I was saying last week we discussed how the new name for the CMO was the Chief Mud and Muck Officer.
Yes.
And it almost seems to be this, as I was saying in the previous topic, the race to the bottom of the barrel. I could almost answer this by saying just see topic number one, because they're all interconnected. We see all the indicators are moving in the wrong direction, where these small, incredible boutiques are struggling because of procurement, because of the shift from AOR to project-based work. But I think 2 points. I want to make 2 points. One is we're all kind of sending our condolences and lamenting the shutting down of this agency. Maybe there are other reasons why the agency shut down, and maybe it's their own fault. It probably isn't, but maybe it is.
Oh yeah, undoubtedly. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that it's not just this one factor that led to the shutdown of BART and F-Graph, but it is an interesting question. It's an interesting question, this whole move.
I guess the other point is but they really are symbolic of all agencies, including people on this call as well, in terms of our own entrepreneurial efforts and ventures. And I think what has to come out of this, because necessity is the mother of invention, and we do need a new model. We need a new operating model, a new service model when it comes to how agencies work with clients. And maybe the answer isn't AOR, but it probably isn't piecemeal project work either. Maybe there's a hybrid approach with a small retainer, at least, with certain project-based work that allows agencies to play in a pool or a sandbox. I just can't believe here we are in 2019 and we still haven't fixed the problem.
Farah, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, because I mean, it dovetails so wonderfully, this subject, with the last topic. This idea that this relationship with the client is broken. Is it broken, or are the agencies just needing to evolve a little bit more and figure out this problem from the standpoint of what's best for their client?
Well, I mean, I was thinking about this earlier and actually talking to my husband about this topic earlier, and he made a really good point, which is that, there are no consultancies of record. There are no market research companies of record. We weren't when I was at Holland Partners, we weren't of record as the market research company. I mean, we were a preferred provider on a couple of things, but they could just as easily go anyplace else. Everything we did was project-based, and these were growing companies. The answer to that for us was twofold. One was absolutely right-sizing teams and being able to manage projects in a way where you understand that you are managing projects. No one's going to be sitting around waiting for the next assignment from the client. We're going to have to move bodies around on different projects. It's a different model than relying on the AOR. The other side of it, though, is what brings someone back? And this is, I think, is the challenge of every startup, every entrepreneur, every freelancer, every small agency, is how do you create a relationship with the client that, even if it's not under an AOR contract, is still the kind of relationship where they trust you. They trust that you understand their business, that you understand their customer, that you know those things better than anybody else is going to. And so there's no point in talking to anybody else. So project after project after project comes. Now, there are other issues with that, right? Which is, and then they leave, they go to some other company. But I have moments where I think, oh, that's too bad. I have worked in agencies with AOR relationships. On the other hand, I've worked in a lot of companies and have been on my own for 10 years, and I don't have any AOR relationships. That would be silly. Everything's project based. Part of me wants to just say, adapt or die, silly. But the other part of me kind of says, but in the meantime, a lot of people are going to be looking for new work. And I think that's just where we are. The other part of it to me is this issue of in-housing. And I think, to go back to the procurement conversation, having worked in agencies where we were like digital AOR or regular above the line AOR, and seeing those small projects that justify that relationship fall away because they're easier to handle in-house. They're easier to make programmatic. They're easier to automate. All of those the collateral pieces, the direct mail, the email newsletter, the social posts. Like, you can hand those to people who can be way more efficient than a big full service holding company owned agency, or even a full service boutique. You just can't move that fast. You can't be always on producing all of this content. And so they bring it to a place that's more efficient. It's performance marketing with performance metrics and performance tools. They don't need the greatest creative minds of our generation building that stuff. So there's just sort of I guess here's what I'm getting at. This has been coming for a while, guys. Like, why is this suddenly like, oh my God, Barton F. Graph closed? Is this the end of the AOR relationship? That slide has been going for at least 10 years. And there was never any sign that it was going to resurge. And I doubt very much it will come back. I think there will be a few of those kinds of relationships, but we're all going to have to learn to dance to new music.
Right. Well said.
Yeah, I can't add anything to that. That's just a perfect summation of what the situation is. I think that it is gone too far, and it's been coming for a long time. Totally agree. Well, we're going to swing really, really far from that topic and go next to the Facebook rebranding their satellite apps topic, because Facebook announced that they will be bringing their name to all of their properties, like Instagram and WhatsApp, not WhatsApp, with a by Facebook added to every single logo. So, Alan, why would they do this? Why would they do this, especially considering the fact that Facebook has so many problems right now? Is this all about the consolidation of making it one platform so that they can't be broken up? Or is this some kind of just flawed move to say we need to brand this as a Facebook property because we're cool and everybody will love us?
Yeah, it's the why is the big question, and there is no from a quote unquote branding theory point of view. There's not a lot of good answers. Less is more in the world of brand. So, are Instagram users saying, "Gee, I might use Instagram, but I wish they were really owned by somebody bigger," or "Gee, I was going to call my friends in Europe, but I'm not feeling that they have the right social network platform to connect me on my WhatsApp." So from the user base, it's not a consumer-driven thing for sure. None of the and even Facebook users, your father's Oldsmobile social media folks, are not saying, "Gee, I'm going to stick on Facebook because they do have these other cool things, so I'm not as out of touch as people think I am." So I think perhaps a Wall Street audience, Mark's feeling, "Gee, I got to remind Wall Street that we're more than Facebook, even though, that's the only thing that's in the news today. And I have these other cooler properties that are not giving away everyone's personal information." But I don't have a good why. Anytime you put one brand on top of the other, it's usually a bad idea.
Yeah, it's just mind-boggling. I mean, but Joe, what about this idea that maybe this was done purely because they were trying to keep themselves from being broken up, that they're trying to put everything under one roof as they're trying to make it one platform behind the scenes? Because we all know about the stories about how all the different messaging apps, all the different social media sites, all of them are going to be coming into one common platform to make it impossible to break up the company because it's all one large system. Is that what's really behind this branding effort, to try to put a stake in the ground and say, we are one company, this is not a whole bunch of companies, you can't break us up because it would make the system incompatible, unworkable, put us out of business? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I blame their AOR, because no doubt that must have come from their AOR. There's no doubt. Look, I actually think it's almost the opposite of what you just said, which is the one thing that Facebook should probably look to avoid doing right now is to remind us all that they're all part of this big company. And all of our data is swimming between these different entities and being harvested and bought and sold to the highest bidder, allegedly. So I don't think. I mean, this just smacks of a little bit of hubris. The buy Facebook powered by Intel Inside. It doesn't make sense in the sense that Instagram and WhatsApp have built these independent powerhouses. Facebook did well to acquire them. We all kind of laughed at Facebook when they did acquire them for $1 billion and whatever it was, 1.7 billion. No, it was more, 17 billion, I think.
No, it was 4 billion, I
what-
think.
What was the WhatsApp one was insanely high, but
WhatsApp
you know,
was high,
we give them kudos for those buys, and arguably the purchase of Instagram saved Facebook in terms of their their lack of penetration and progress with mobile. So I think any kind of branding or reminder branding now could potentially backfire. Now, look, I will say from a branding standpoint, I don't want to beat up on Facebook all the time. Google is one of the greatest branding stories of our day, where you go to google.com and the only image or logo that is available there or that you see is Google's image. Billions of free impressions and advertising every single day. And so one might kind of see that as a possible reason, which is all of this usage and all of this popularity of these various nodes or acquisitions, by being able to put a by Facebook, from Facebook, powered by Facebook, it is just continuing to kind of raise awareness for the Facebook brand. I mean, again, I feel like people know who Facebook is, but that's probably the only maybe justifiable reason, which is to kind of just jump on the bandwagon with free impressions.
Well, let's take it apart. I mean, does anybody have any advantage for doing this? Is everybody, like, Farah, you haven't weighed in yet. I mean, it's like, do you agree with these guys that there's like no potential advantage at all in doing this, or is there some kind of foreseeable advantage for them doing this if they play their cards right?
I mean, it looks to me like a defensive move in two layers. One is a Wall Street defensive move. Growth is still happening for Facebook, but it's slowed. This is a way to remind the street that they're innovating. We've got these two other really cool products too, guys. It's not all Facebook. Look at the things we're doing to integrate those things. And the other side, I think, is aimed at regulators. It is aimed at, we're going to make it as complicated as possible for you to break us up if that's what you want to do. And we're signaling now that that's how we're choosing to handle this threat that a breakup or regulation might happen. I don't think either one of those things helps them particularly, because I think the branding problem is still the branding problem. I don't need Instagram to be by Facebook. I sort of know that in the back of my mind, but by reminding me every day, you're just bringing me that much closer to quitting Instagram. And WhatsApp by Facebook, it's a dumb mouthful of a thing to say. No one's ever going to say it. You're not going to get people talking on Facebook or on Twitter or on Instagram about how happy they are to see that by Facebook appendage suddenly sticking out. So, I think it's a terrible branding move, but I understand that it probably wasn't made by the brand team. It was probably made by people who are feeling defensive with both the street and with the regulators.
I'm totally baffled by this, but I think that's pretty obvious from the way this conversation has rolled out. I just can't see any advantages besides those last two that you just talked about, Farah.
It reminds me of the old book that on advertising, where the famous ad guy, Jerry Della Femina, was pitching Panasonic, and he joked around with the Panasonic client, and he said, what about calling our product saying, from the wonderful people who brought you Pearl Harbor? So it has that feeling that if you're an Instagram person, now we got to have from Facebook on our homepage, and that's really going to help.
Really good point. Well, we're going to move on to the final topic. There comes rumbling from the House of Mouse that their purchase of the Star Wars franchise may not be the long-term cash cow that they thought it would be. And they're blaming, who else? Millennials. Now, Joe, what are your thoughts on Star Wars not connecting with younger consumers? Can we blame this on millennials, or is there something bigger afoot with this particular product? And also, is the Star Wars brand really tanking, or did they just have a couple bad movies?
I mean, it seems that, and I read two source articles. One that kind of made the case as to why potentially there was some trouble in the House of Mouse, and then another one that said, calm down. It's not as bad as you think. You know, the actual article and what we're discussing is really relating to theme park attendance, and specifically the launch of the new kind of Star Wars experience, which I believe is called Galaxy's Edge. The reporting that took place and the data that they were referring to was only based on about 30 or 31 days, so 1 month of actual attendance, and this was on Bob Iger's quarterly earnings call. So there still were there were still 2 months to come, and perhaps attendance started out a little bit on the low side. One of the Yogi Berrisms that comes to mind is nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded. There was a lot of feeling that like people stayed away initially thinking that the crowds would be insane, and what Bob Iger actually did was he tried to implement a reservation system which didn't take. So it may be 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Overall, Disney park attendance is up. On the flip side, you have a lot of competition out there. I mean, cross-platform, cross-media, but also immense popularity from the whole Harry Potter experience from Universal. But with that aside, let me talk briefly about the Star Wars franchise. I think, in one corner is the argument that it is truly generational, and younger consumers, millennials, Gen Zers, for them to really embrace this entire franchise, just with a clean slate, it's a very tall order. It's a very ambitious ask. Rather, they would be introduced, or they might have been introduced to the franchise through parents, through older siblings, etc. But I think actually what it comes down to is just plain economics and business statistics. When Marvel, which is also owned by Disney, kicking butt like no franchise has ever, but they're just pumping out movies like almost seemingly every 3 to 4 months or 4 to 6 months. With Star Wars, the way that they've told their anchor tenant story has been, during the holiday season, every and correct me, guys, is it every year or every 2 years that another episode comes out?
Right now, on the Anchor franchise, it's been one every 2 years with a secondary franchise offering during the off year.
Right. Exactly. That's too long a gap. So what they've tried to do is pepper in the Rogue Ones, which did okay, and the Solos, which were an absolute dud. And so in order to kind of keep this franchise on the front burner, and support feet through the door in terms of theme park attendance, probably what does need to happen, and I think it has nothing to do with millennials, is to figure out a better release schedule for tentpole events like movies, and
I don't know that that's the case, because I mean, take Solo for instance. Solo was well marketed, well placed, had a name director, a name celebrity. They really went and did everything correctly for a film like that, and it was a good film. No matter what people feel about it, it was a good film in the Star Wars franchise, and yet nobody went to see it. And I think that's a concerning factor. If you can't get the audience out to see your film, and it's even a good film and it does everything right, that's a warning sign.
Yeah, possibly. And I mean, I think it was, and it might just come down to a generational reason, but I think to blame it on millennials or Gen Zers, I think it's oversimplifying the argument. It just might be, a franchise that was reborn that seemed to do very well, but I think by acquiring it and putting so much pressure on it, it was almost an unrealistic expectation. There has to be a ceiling, surely, when it comes to a franchise that has its roots and legacy, in a generation past.
Well, I think there's another, just from a kind of creative point of view, I guess, like if you compare it to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they do the Avengers movies infrequently and the character movies frequently, but the character movies are also keep the momentum going forward of the Avenger arc. So it's not these kind of weird, and now we'll do a flashback to the origin story of Solo. Like, whoa. We're up here in, in the Rey storyline now. We're like, Solo's dead, Carrie Fisher's dead, but being CGI'd. Like this is after the big battles. So why are we flapping back in time to look at where Solo came from? I mean, I enjoyed the movie. I'm a sucker. I'll watch any of them, and I think it was good. But it's not the same kind of formula. They're acting like it is. It's like, big tent pole character story, but they're all flashbacks, and I don't feel like it's helping propel the story forward in the way that the MCU has handled that. And on the theme park side, go check out the Harry Potter experiences and tell me that Disney in general lives up to it. So even setting aside the new Star Wars stuff, which, as I understand it, is on par with that kind of immersive, every detail thought through perfection of going and hanging out in Diagon Alley in Potter World, like, that is something that is not happening at the rest of the theme park for Disney. So having this one experience that's going to live up to that level of immersion is amazing. But I think there are these economic realities of the price of admission went up, the hotel prices went up. You got to go to California for it because Orlando hasn't opened it yet. It's, it should come as no surprise that wasn't doing that well yet. I think we'll see it get better, but I also don't think that this is like the end of Disney. The Star Wars franchise marches on. Disney Plus is launching. Like there's a lot of stuff going on for. There's a lot of stuff going on for that brand.
It's clear that Disney is not in trouble. I mean, I don't think anybody was.
The House of Mouse had the best year ever, and they're cleaning up at the box office.
Yeah,
but I do think you're right, Bob, and I think that there's a piece of the Star Wars buzz that is not what it used to be, and may not be strong enough to play on par with a Potter or an Avengers, and so they may have invested the experience behind the wrong franchise versus building out the Toy Story experience. So I think time will tell. But I think there's enough smoke around Star Wars to say either they got to get the writing better or it's just not feeling like it's firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, it really doesn't. And it's just like, I think they do have some stuff to worry about, but I don't think they have to worry about them closing the doors. So I don't think, Star Wars will weigh down the ship and make them sink. So just to be clear. Well, anyway, it's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do some shameless plugs, starting with Alan Adamson. You can find him at it's metaforce.co, right? Or am I getting it wrong?
Yeah, metaforce.co, and we're sort of the special forces of marketing, trying to figure out what lever you need to push to generate growth, and then connecting you with the resources to activate and execute. Because in the world we live today, everyone knows average is over, and you could have the best strategy, but if you don't execute it great, you have nothing. So trying to get that sweet spot between what do you need to do to grow, and if you do everything, you'll be invisible. Pick the one or two levers that are going to make a difference, and then how do you make sure when you push those levers, it's going to help you shift your business ahead?
That sounds great, and really appreciate you coming on the program this time. Thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you, Walt.
Farah Bostic, you can find her at thedifferenceengine.co. Another co. Make sure you put a co, not a com, but it's The Difference Engine. Tell us what's going on in your world, Farah. What would you like to promote?
So there will be a little bit more to promote in about a month's time when we've got some new stuff going up on the website and a relaunch of a newsletter, but I'm going to hold off on that until it's really ready to talk about. In the meantime, we're starting to do a couple of workshops, and one is a workshop around getting to better creative briefs and a better creative brief writing process. We've been sort of workshopping it with clients for the last about a year, and we're feeling really good about it. So if anybody's interested in that, you can get in touch. And the other one is for strategy teams and product teams on how to roll your own qualitative research, because it seems like a dying art in agencies, or a dead one already, and one that a lot of startups are trying to get their heads around. So yeah, you can get in touch with me about that.
There's always something exciting going on in your world. If it's not that, it's something to do with your house. So, like I say, we keep
Right now, all I can say is my house is clean. That's all I can tell you.
And last but not least, Joseph Jaffe. You can find him at the HMSbeagle.com. That's the home of the consultancy founded with Lynn Power. Tell us what's going on in your world, Joe. What would you like to promote as if I did not know? Go for it.
Well, first of all, I'm thinking, should I change my URL to the hmsbeagle.co? Because that seems to be the trend. But I don't know. What thoughts? Should I?
You should get it.
Yeah,
I'm not saying
Sarah
you should
right
get rid
now
of
is
com.
like, she's registering it, and she's like, "I'll show him."
It's done already.
Damn. Yes. So I submitted a panel for next year's South by Southwest, and wanted to kind of take the thinking behind Built to Suck and the survival planning canvas that I created and actually create something workshopy and practical as well. And so the title of the panel is Put Yourself Out of Business or Someone Else Will. And it's really a strategic planning process that's designed to almost kind of create a competing product, a cannibalistic offering within the company that kind of attempts to take down the brand. And then the question becomes, well, if it's such a good idea, and I'm going to show plenty of examples of companies that have done that, why aren't you doing it yourself? But more importantly, what are the odds that somebody isn't planning that exact same idea right now and looking to take you down? And so when we look at the Dollar Shaves and the Harry's case study in reference to Gillette, it's a perfect backdrop of what happens when you don't kind of take that very vulnerable and self-effacing approach, which is to accept the fact that your baby might just be quite ugly, and it's okay to call it ugly, and then just try and figure out where you go from there. So that's the panel that I put together. And of course, people that listen to the show, if you are going to South by Southwest or considering, please vote up the panel, because I'm not going to get in without your help. So I appreciate it very much. And if you do end up going, we can have a beer or 2 or 10 together.
That sounds like a lot like the Israel's 10th man strategy. Is it 10th man or 11th man strategy? The idea that there's always one person at the table who's taking the view that the absolute outlandish thing could happen, like a zombie apocalypse could happen, And it's such a powerful way of predicting what the enemy could potentially be doing. So it's a fascinating look. I'd really be interested in seeing that slide deck when you get it together. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive, how to consult with me, and even how to find out how to advertise on the program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, the good of the week. I love the Popeye's chicken move that they made. They had a novel way of launching their new chicken sandwich. They went back to Sweet Dixie Kitchen, the Long Beach, California restaurant made infamous when they were outed for reserving Popeyes as part of their own chicken and waffles dishes. They went back to this place that literally stole their brand, that caused an internet sensation, became a meme, and they launched their chicken sandwich there rather than in their own sandwich stores. I love this idea, Farah, because it's so filled with, just awareness of where they stand as a brand and awareness of what the internet can do when it takes a meme. What are your thoughts?
I mean, first of all, they clearly know a lot about their brand. They know so much about their brand. They know way more about it than I do. I had no idea about any of this backstory, but yeah, good for them for kind of rolling with it and being, I don't know, being hip to it, man. I think it was a good move.
Now, next we have the bad of the week. iFixit, the website dedicated to mobile device repair, revealed this week that Apple had modified the chipset of new iPhones to repeatedly display a warning and turn off battery health features when you have anyone but Apple replace your battery. And this, Alan, is what gets me. Even if it's a genuine Apple battery, even if it's actually a battery that was meant to be in the phone, if it's not placed in there by an Apple genius, it's not going to work in your phone correctly. This seems extremely iffy and seems like it's probably not a really good idea, and it caused a lot of backlash for them, a lot of PR problems.
Yeah, and I think it will continue. As people hold on to their phones longer, the only thing for sure is that more and more people will have to finally say, gee, I'm going to keep it another 6 months unless it gets run over by a truck, but I need to replace the battery. And when they find out that, what the battery costs are and the installation costs, and they find all the hassles, Apple should be focused on holding on to the users and keeping them happy, whatever it takes, because it's a marathon, not a sprint.
And in a practical sense, I don't know very many people who replace the batteries in their iPhones. It's not a very easy process to begin with, no matter whether you have it done by a third party or not. So I'm not sure how much of a problem this is going to be for them. But it caused a lot of problems in the press this week, so obviously an issue. Now the ugly, Joe. SoulCycle and Equinox Gyms chose the worst possible week to launch their new Peloton competitor. Namely, they decided to do so on the very same day that news broke about the CEO of their joint parent company, Related Properties, Stephen Ross, how he would be hosting a fundraising dinner for Donald Trump's re-election campaign. Now, if you know anything about Equinox Gyms and SoulCycle, they are located in the bluest of blue states across the board. And, obviously populated, most of their customer base are blue voting voters. So this makes zero sense to me. And the fact that it all came out at the same time made for an ugly, ugly week for these guys.
Yeah, or maybe, because it seems that everybody's peddling in conspiracy theories at the moment.
Pedal.
I wish that was planned. I wish that was planned. Maybe their offering just sucks so much that they tried to make sure it was buried, with all this press at the same time. Because, their business model, this isn't about putting yourself out of business. For them, putting themselves out of business is just by staying in business with these overpriced subscription-based, bricks and mortar offerings, when you've got this incredible, darling startup called Peloton that has come from nowhere and has this completely innovative business model. So for me, Equinox, more so Equinox than SoulCycle, coming out with this Peloton-like offering is kind of like the CBS All Access. It's trying to it's all greed, right? It's trying to hold on to a shrinking pie for as long as possible. And so maybe they try to bury this announcement with all the bad press, or maybe not.
That is a conspiracy theory for you. That one's really, really far-reaching, but good points all. Well, have a suggestion for the list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag GBU. That's #GBU. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C-Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.